what Oracy is. It's a fairly new term, and it's not a term that comes up in the program, but we have been using it for the past couple of years. So we're just trying to assess your understanding of what it is before we get started.
And I just wanted to let everyone know that I've started recording.
Dawn, can you monitor the chat for me?
Yeah, so we have expressing ideas clearly, communicating ideas, talking out your ideas, communication. So, wow, great start. Speaking the proper use of language while expressing yourself in another way, other than writing, communicating effectively, organizing thoughts. You were right, Stephanie. You've got a group that's on fire here. Wow.
All right. Well, I'm just going to jump in and give you a couple of definitions from some different places. So, Voice 21 is a nonprofit organization that you may have heard of in the UK, and they've been working on promoting Oracy in schools across their country since 2016. And they define Oracy as the ability to articulate ideas, develop understanding, and engage with others through spoken language. And having also worked on the development and support of our own talk competency, the PACT Subcommittee on Talk believes that Oracy enables us to navigate the world and our own learning through the skills and processes of talking and listening. So simply put, Oracy is learning to use our voices and learning through our voices. So how did we get here and why? Educator and researcher James Britton wrote that reading and writing float on a sea of talk. And it's certainly an apt metaphor for how talk works in our ELA programs. Yet our research showed that teachers have very little support and resources when it comes to teaching talk. So just to briefly explain how we got to this point, the Provincial Advisory Council for Teachers of English, PACT, identified talk about 2 years ago as an area in which educators across the province needed more support. And this inspired us to survey ELA teachers across the province to learn more about the state of talk in our schools. And probably many of you received and even filled out that survey. So the findings from that survey will be published in a report that we hope to have ready by the end of this school year. And we use the information from the survey, which you see here. So we asked teachers what would most help them teach and assess talk. And you can see from the results on the screen that more than 80% of respondents chose formative assessment tools as their top choice. And this data, along with information from the survey, guided us in the creation of our Oracy tools and an Oracy toolkit, which is basically a collection of resources to support teachers in the teaching of talk. The tools were validated last year by a group of teachers from 6 different school boards, which included teachers from Eastern Township School Board, and I think 2 of those teachers from our talk triads are with us this morning. So a shout out to Marina and Christina. Thank you very much. And they were also validated by a private school, and I believe the tools also were validated by Bishop's University. So the Oracy Toolkit will be available on the Literacy Today website later this year. And this morning, we'll be sharing with you the primary tools in the Oracy Toolkit, so the Oracy Skills tool and the 2 Continua. Okay, so we chose this quote by Douglas Barnes, who is a professor and researcher at Leeds University, because it reflects how talk is presented in our programs. And Barnes expanded on the Britton quote that I gave to you just earlier that we mentioned, and he said that learning floats on a sea of talk. So we went from reading and writing to now learning floating on a sea of talk. Barnes was a proponent of constructivist education. He wrote extensively on the virtues of exploratory talk. So we're going to start out by looking at how Oracy fits in with the ELA curriculum and exploratory talk. So you're probably already familiar with the curriculum. You're all teaching ELA. The ELA talk competency has 2 facets, so learning to talk as well as talking to learn. And we've chosen 2 quotes from the programs that are a really nice reminder of how talk is presented in them. So in the ELA program, that's the elementary ELA program, it states that the focus of this competency is language in use for communicating and for learning. That is oral discourse used in all its varieties, with a special emphasis on active learning through talk. And in the secondary Cycle 1 program, it states that the 2 uses of language, to communicate and to learn, which were the focus also of the ELA program, continue to be increasingly important to the developing literacy of the student and to his or her success in the secondary school and beyond. So what we've learned from working with the ELA community and from our survey results is that although exploratory talk is recognized as being essential to learning, it's not always given the same importance as presentational talk in the classroom when we're teaching and assessing. So exploratory talk involves trying out ideas, figuring things out, solving problems, negotiating meaning, and it's the kind of talk that can be really messy. It's sometimes very uncertain or tentative, and it can be incomplete. But it's the type of talk that's really essential to the learning process. Presentational talk, on the other hand, is usually planned and it's practiced. So the types of presentational talk that we typically see have very specific codes and conventions, and it tends to be more organized, and it's usually considered to be easier to teach and assess. Our purpose for developing the Oracy Skills tool, which we'll show you in a few minutes, is to support the teaching of both types of talk, so exploratory and presentational, and to shift classroom practice back to the program's intentions, which is using language to talk and to learn, and developing that aspect of talk through the competency like learning through talk in addition to learning to talk. Alrighty. So over the past couple of years, we've been working extensively on talk with consultants and teachers, and as well as with the data that we've gleaned from the survey. And it's helped us come to realize a couple of things about talk, which we want to take a moment to highlight. Okay, I'd invite you at this point just to write down for yourself. So don't write anything in the chat, just maybe on a piece of paper next to you. Basically, one or two of the top strategies that you go to teach talk in your classroom. And I'll give you a minute to do that. Okay, only has to be one or two things. We're going to play a short video that highlights some of the realizations that we had from the survey, and as well as through discussions with teachers and consultants as we were laying the groundwork for the creation of the tools. So here we go. So who has a mixture of what you wrote down before we watched the video of strategies that support talk as well as the explicit teaching of talk? Does anybody want to weigh in?
Nothing in the chat so far. You could also put your mic on if you would prefer to answer that way.
Yeah. I had you.
Oh, Marina has her hand up. So how about if we just go for it? Marina?
Yep.
Sure. So I think I have a bit of an unfair advantage because I had the opportunity to work on the talk stuff with Stephanie quite a bit. But I would say that before before having that opportunity, all of mine would have fallen on the left side of the list. So like the think, pair, share, group discussions, that kind of thing. But since working on the pact, the talk triads, I've learned that it was actually pretty shocking when I started teaching talk, like putting up talk moves and then establishing rules for talk in our class, how much even in grade 6, students didn't realize that all the different components that went into talk. So now I think I have a mixture, but before I would definitely say I fell completely on the left side of the list.
Thank you. And that was one of the things that we noticed too. And the data that we analyzed through the survey is kind of pointed to what Gaunt and Stott said at the very beginning of the Powtoon, how that it's easy to fall into the trap of supporting talk and thinking that we're teaching talk when we're giving students the opportunity to use talk. So we realized that we really needed to shine a light on this misconception. And while we need to support talk in the classroom, obviously, we also need to use those strategies to teach talk explicitly. Okay, so in the survey, we also asked teachers in which situation they believed their students required explicit instruction to use talk to communicate and to learn. And you can see on the left side of the screen, some 86% of teachers felt that students required explicit talk skills to participate in presentational talk, so speeches, debates, and presentations. 10% of teachers across the province felt that students needed no instruction, and 4% were not sure. And on the right-hand side, we can see that some 73% of teachers felt that explicit teaching was necessary for collaborative exploratory talk. So that's like small group and whole class discussions that would include literature circles and things like that. And then it leaves still another 26% of teachers who felt that students needed no instruction and 1% who were not sure. And there were a number of reasons that could explain why over a quarter of the teachers across the province in ELA think that explicit teaching is not necessary for exploratory talk. Some of them felt that since kids come into their class with English as their mother tongue, that they don't need to be taught explicit skills, and it frees up more time for them to focus on reading and writing. Other teachers expected that the explicit teaching should have happened in the previous cycles, so that these skills should have been learned by the time they get to wherever they're being taught. And then there was another group of teachers that felt that talk could disrupt student behavior, that it gets students off task, that it makes shy students feel uncomfortable, or that it's simply something that's too difficult to do online. So these are the reasons that I think we found that supported why over a quarter of teachers across the province are not or do not feel that students need explicit teaching for talk. And at the same time, we asked teachers to consider the role that confidence plays in teaching and learning oracy. And teachers across the province overwhelmingly felt that students lack the necessary confidence for most talk-based activities. So in the very first little bar graph that you see on the left of your screen, we're looking at the two bluer bars to the right here. 79% of teachers across the province felt that only half or less than half of their students can confidently justify their ideas with arguments or opinions. In the second bar graph, 78% of teachers estimated that half to less than half of their students can select the appropriate register. And in the third one, 3/4 of the teachers polled estimated that half or less than half of their students can listen actively and critically. And in the last bar graph, 74% of teachers think that only half or less than half of their students can clearly articulate ideas with other students. So our data shows that 75 to 80% of students across the province, that teachers feel that many students are struggling to find the confidence that they need to develop as functioning communicators. And these results were really shocking, especially in light of the percentage of teachers on the previous slide who felt that they didn't really need explicit instruction. So the data gave us a lot to reflect on insofar as how we teach our students to use language to communicate and learn, and the crucial role that confidence plays in our students' oracy development. Are there any questions before I move on?
Nothing in the chat.
Alrighty. Okay. So given these realizations from the survey, we decided to focus on 4 foundational beliefs regarding oracy education. So the talk competency, which is using language to communicate and to learn, requires 4 things. A positive classroom environment is really important. Clear norms and guidelines that, Marina, you mentioned earlier, are super important as well. Explicit teaching of the skills and purposeful oracy tasks. Okay, so foundational belief number 1, classroom environment is absolutely key to promoting quality talk. Our research shows that classroom environment is one of the most important factors affecting student learning, and it's in line with research as well. According to Diamond, Aldridge, and Fraser, students learn better when they view the learning environment as positive and supportive. Buchholz and Scheffler state that in a positive environment, students feel a sense of belonging, they trust others, and they feel encouraged to tackle challenges, take risks, and ask questions. And Weimer points out that this type of environment provides relevant content, clear learning goals, which we're going to focus on a lot today, and feedback as well, and opportunities to build social skills and strategies to help students succeed. So, what can classroom talk look like? Now, we're going to, hold on a second, we're going to look at a very short clip in just a second, which gives us an example of what sometimes classroom talk can look like. And as we watch the video, we'd ask you to keep in mind, what advice would you give this teacher? When we come back, we're going to do a very quick Jamboard so that you can pop your ideas or your advice that you would give this teacher on the Jamboard. Here we go.
So today's discussion is if you have seriously. Anyone? I got some. I put down 10. I got transfer 5. Yeah, we should have the binder because they're good. And on your class, you're my stature. Oh my god, I think I have my phone and I can't really use it to talk to you right now, Aisha. Hold on. Danielle, I thought we were playing a game. Hold on. Danielle. Hillary, I'm gonna take hold on. Oh my god. Stop. All right. Oh shit. There's some right there. Okay. Let's go. Let's go.
Okay, so super quick clip, but what advice would you give the teacher to try and reel these students in so that their small group discussion is going to really focus on quality talk? And Stephanie, can you set up a Jamboard for us?
It's in the chat right now. You just have to click on the link.
Perfect.
And if you're not familiar on how to use a Jamboard, there's a little sticky note. There's like a little square on the left-hand side. So to add ideas, you can just click on that and type your idea on the sticky note.
And people are in there already. That's fantastic. Okay, yeah, put the phones away for sure. Model proper listening skills. Set up norms to provide more detailed instructions to guide the students. Clear expectations before starting the activity. Take some time to set up the space, put things away. Yeah, those kids were super distracted. Work with the students to develop a set of rules and norms during discussions. Collaborative rules work better. Absolutely. And we're going to make a point of that in the next slide, I think. Set up roles. There's so many, like, wow, there are so many things I can barely keep up with the Jamboard. Set up roles for the students and have an accountability piece. Clearly explain the task and classroom rules. Provide roles for each student, what they have to do in the conversation. Let them choose possible topics to engage their interests. Clear goals and a time limit. Okay. To provide more detailed instructions to guide the students. Take the time to set up space to put things away. Okay. Have the students record their conversation. Yeah, that could be eye-opening when you play it back to them, absolutely. Let them choose roles to keep them engaged. Let them choose possible topics to engage their interest. Okay, so there's tons of things, have a checklist before starting. Great. These are excellent ideas. Take some time to set up space and to put things away. All right. Are they just popping up because you're moving them around the board, Stephanie?
Yeah, I'm just trying to sort them to like similar groups.
Okay. All right. So there's kind of like a mixture of things here that speak to how we would set up our classroom environment, as well as some very specific explicit teaching of how we do talk. So how do we listen actively and critically, which is a big part of it, and modeling the listening skills, being very clear with the task and our expectations. Fantastic. So I'm going to try and navigate my way back to where we were, away from the Jamboard. So if I want to go straight back into the presentation, can I do that? Is it just a question, Stephanie, of shutting down the Jamboard?
Well, I still see the presentation.
Okay, you do. All right.
Yeah, so you can just close your Jamboard and then you should be able to go right back.
Perfect. When you record it, does it say the Jamboard in your recording?
Yes. Well, the Jamboard saves in the meeting. So when so it is saved, yes.
Okay.
And everybody has access to it like permanently now. You know what I mean? If they wanted to save it themselves into a folder, but.
Okay. Thank you. All right then. Okay, so you may have had classroom discussions like this, but hopefully you haven't had too many classroom discussions where the kids are this unruly. But we have to wonder when we see students like this, whether they've ever been taught the necessary skills that they need to engage in academic kinds of conversations. So some of you highlighted things that we need to do. Part of setting up a positive classroom environment is establishing norms and guidelines for talk in the classroom. And it might be as simple as brainstorming with the students the top 5 or 6 key things that make for a really good discussion. And we've listed a couple of examples on the slide. So respect each other's ideas, invite others to participate by asking them a question. And it's a really simple but powerful way of ensuring that the expectations for the conversation are clear and well defined. And I think somebody noted on the Jamboard that it works better when you do this collaboratively with students, because that's absolutely right, to get them involved. Okay, and we all know that a positive classroom environment doesn't just happen. And there was an anonymous quote from a teacher who responded to our survey on talk, and they summed it up beautifully when they said that creating an environment in which students feel comfortable to share ideas with their teacher and peers takes time and some teaching. So developing rules around maintaining a respectful climate while still promoting strategies for challenge and disagreement takes monitoring and instruction from the teacher. And now I'm going to pass it over to Dawn to introduce the Oracy Skills tool.
So Melinda just went through the first 2 foundational beliefs, the importance of a positive classroom environment and the need to establish norms and guidelines. And to illustrate the next foundational belief, we need to teach the skills explicitly. We're going to present to you the Oracy Skills tool. And let's see. Let's see, here we go. Okay, so what you see in this graphic is a summary of all the talk skills in the ELA programs. And this covers all kinds of talk in any context at all levels. There's nothing new here. And the tool does not replace the programs. We've just highlighted and organized all of the talk skills in the elementary and secondary programs and put them all on one page. So the goal is to have a reminder of what to teach for the talk competency all in one place to support us in teaching talk explicitly and helping students learn how to use their voices in all kinds of ways, not just for presentations. And you might be thinking, how will I have time to teach all of this? Because it certainly looks like a lot. But a lot of times talk and these Oracy skills can be integrated into what we already do. And just a quick example, when I was a literacy consultant at the Sir Wilfrid Laurier School Board, I often worked with teachers and students on how to ask good questions in literature circle discussions. And the purpose of the questions was always with a focus on the book to make meaning. But after working with this tool, now I realize we could have incorporated more teaching of talk skills. And I think that would have enriched the conversations, deepened their understanding, and taught students talk skills that they could continue to use in other situations. And we'll be showing you a specific example of that coming up soon. The Oracy Skills tool includes a definition of Oracy. So this is one of the definitions that Melinda showed you earlier, the one that came from the PACT Talk subcommittee who created this tool. And I'd like to mention at this point that we're really lucky to have Stephanie working with us on this subcommittee. And you might not know that she does a lot of, she's put in a lot of work with us on that committee. And a lot of the things that you're seeing today are thanks to Stephanie and all the wonderful people working on that committee. The Oracy Skills tool is organized into 4 color-coded categories or strands. So we have a physical strand, a linguistic strand, cognitive, social, and emotional. And all of these fall under the umbrella of the metacognitive strand. And we're going to do a jigsaw activity to help you become familiar with the different strands, because I know you can't really see on your screen all the details that are involved here. So you'll need to have a copy of the Oracy Skills tool. And you do have that in the folder that Stephanie shared with you, but I just put a link to that particular document in the chat as well. So if you're looking in your Google folder, it's a PDF called Oracy Skills. And we're going to have 4 breakout rooms, 1 for each strand. And we're going to ask each group to read through and see what's included in their strand and then summarize it for the whole group. Stephanie, were we able to get 4 groups that are named for the strands, or are we group 1, group 2, group 3?
No, we're good. They're named.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so your group name will tell you which strand you're looking at. So you will be, you only have to focus on your own strands. So you might be the orange physical group, or pink linguistic, or blue cognitive, or green social and emotional. And we're not going to look at the turquoise section of the metacognitive section just yet. So you'll need to nominate a spokesperson to present the highlights of your strand when we come back together. And basically just look over your strand, see what you see there, talk about what you see there, and see if you can summarize it for the rest of us. We'll take about 5 minutes to do that. And I'm just wondering if anyone has a question before we send you off. Everybody's okay? You can always come back to the main, leave your group and come back to the main group if you have questions, if you need us for anything. All right. So I think, Stephanie, we're ready to go into the groups.
Yeah, hopefully everything will go smoothly. I'm going to open them now and you'll be sent there.
Okay, so I think everyone is back from the breakout. I hope you had enough time to discuss, and I hope that it was all clear. So we're going to start with the physical strand. So could we please have someone from the orange physical group tell us what's included in this strand? How would you summarize this for us?
There, I can do it, Karen. So at first when we saw it, we saw right away that it looked a lot like the presentation aspect, the presentational talk. So we often mark those things or check for those things during presentations. But then as we discussed it more, we saw that, well, we can model that during group discussions and like small group work, teaching the tone, teaching expression. So if we look at it a little bit, we saw that the point form looks a lot, like I said earlier, what's on a rubric for presentation, like how your voice is, like your fluency, the tone, your expression, you're not monotone, your clarity. But then there's also the other physical aspect, the rest of your body, right? Your expression, eye contact, your expression, and then your posture, how you're facing your audience. So at first we're like, oh, cool, it's the presentation one. But then we thought, well, it's not just about presentations. It can be about, if one of the teachers in our group said they did presentations online during online teaching. And again, you can look at all of these, even if you're not in person. So it still validates this category, I guess.
Okay, well, thank you. And I'm really glad you mentioned that this would be applicable in a presentational talk or exploratory talk, that it could really cover all kinds of talk, and including online situations too, because we have to be ready for everything these days, right? So thank you, that was great. You might have noticed that some of the text is written in bold font. And that indicates that those terms are included in our glossary. So for example, if we want to check that we all have a common understanding of something, like clarity, for example, we can go to the glossary. And the glossary looks like this. And you can see there's a definition of clarity right there. And we'll be sharing with you a copy of the glossary as part of our Google folder. But it's our intention to have an interactive version soon where you can just mouse over the Oracy documents and have the definitions pop up. So if we go back to our physical strand, like Sarah mentioned, there are kind of two sections. So we have under voice the physical aspects of verbal communication, and then we have the other section that is more based on body language and nonverbal communication. So we might summarize this by saying the physical strand tells us how we use our bodies and our voices to communicate. And thank you very much, physical group. In this PowerPoint, we've included games or activities that you can use to help explain the strands to your students or your colleagues. And here we have a couple of examples for the physical strand. We won't have time to do the activities with you today, but we've included them for your reference. So you'll have access to the PowerPoint. You'll have access to everything after we're finished. And some of the activities, like stack the deck, you would have to do in person because it requires participants to line up in a particular order without speaking. You might have done that in workshops and things yourself. There are other activities, though, like pass the word, that you could also do in a virtual setting. So we'll go on to the linguistic strand, and who's going to be speaking for this group?
We didn't really discuss that, but I can share some things. So when I first read it, I was looking at the stylistic features, like using language to engage and using rhetorical strategies to show meaning. And I was thinking right away of something more formal, like maybe a debate or a speech. But then we also discussed that with the language and grammar and word choice, it could also be pertinent to informal when they're in groups, because you want them using the grammar, the vocabulary that you're teaching, and using that, and you could also show it in a less formal setting as well. So it seemed at first to be very like formal, the linguistic, but then it could be brought over to a group discussion, a small group, a class discussion.
Yeah. Thanks, Lori. I mean, I'm glad that you, your group also noticed that it could be versatile. It could be used in lots of different contexts. Yeah, thank you. Remember that the terms in bold text are defined in the glossary, and there are some things here that are not always the most familiar terms. So, for example, here we have register, grammar, stylistic features, and rhetorical strategies. We might want to consult the glossary here to confirm what exactly are stylistic features. And here we have a definition from the Cycle 1 secondary program. And I like that it includes examples like humor, exaggeration, imagery. And if we're thinking about rhetorical strategies, the glossary provides a definition from the secondary Cycle 2 program, again with some examples, like a call to action, something you might use if you were addressing a crowd at a rally. We wanted to use the language of the programs in the tools and also make sure that everyone who uses the tools has a common understanding. And that's why we thought it was really important to include a glossary. And just a note about rhetorical strategies, they mostly come into play in secondary Cycle 2, but it's possible that younger students might use these strategies given the right context. And if you think about your own children or your students, in some circumstances, they can really make a strong emotional appeal. So even young ones can can demonstrate that as well. Alrighty, so just to summarize this information about the linguistic strand into one sentence, we could say that it focuses on the words we choose and how we use them. And a quick note about something we've had questions about, the difference between vocabulary and word choice. So just to explain that one, vocabulary is knowing words and what they mean. So I might know about figurative language and understand the terms simile and metaphor. I might have subject-specific math vocabulary and be able to name all kinds of triangles, and I know isosceles and acute and equilateral. But word choice takes it a little further, where I use my bank of vocabulary words and choose the best word for a particular context, purpose, or audience. So just like we ask our students to replace overused words, sometimes we tell them instead of using the word said, try something else that is a little bit more descriptive, like whispered or shouted or explained. So that's the difference between the word choice and the vocabulary, because people do ask us that. All right. And I'm clicking, there we go. Here we have a game to help illustrate the idea of register. And we've described a few different scenarios. And the object is to adjust your register according to your audience. So for example, how would you introduce yourself to your new boss, to an elderly neighbor, to a noisy or obnoxious neighbor, a lost child? And you can set up lots of different scenarios according to what would be interesting and appropriate for your students. Okay, now, by far the strand that covers the most skills is the cognitive strand. And I wonder who's going to tell us about that one. It's a big one.
Yeah, I can take that one.
Okay.
So I see Daryl's thumbs up there. Okay, so yeah, we looked at this and thought, wow, like it was a lot. This was the one that we were probably least comfortable summarizing because, like you said, there's a lot of different components. Some of the things we talked about was that this could be looked at like informally and talk a little bit, and just having kids like think about their response or what they would like, or their point, what they would like to say before they say it. A lot of times, from my experience, kids kind of just will. They think they're building on to a friend's idea, but in reality, they're just rephrasing it. So giving them that opportunity to like think about what they're going to say. And then there was also all those little points where it's like connecting, clarifying, questioning, summarizing. Those are a lot of our response skills in writing. So a lot of these could be observed if they're discussing maybe a text or a video of some kind. And then there was also the bottom one where they talked about considering the audience and then reading the audience, making deliberate choices based on the audience. Daryl mentioned that this shows up well when they're talking about something that they have like a lot of knowledge and they're very confident with, and they know the topic really well. It might not be like an educational topic, but maybe something they're passionate about, like horses, and they know a lot about that, and so they're able to do this a little bit better that way.
Yeah, great point.
Summarizes what we talked about. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thanks, Marina. I know that was that was a big ask because it's an awful lot to condense into one sentence. But you really touched on a lot of the key points there. And we could say the cognitive strand represents the thought processes that form the basis for our speaking and listening. So it's all the things that we're thinking about as we're talking, whether it's something that's informal, exploratory, or if it's something that's more formal. All right, good. This game to illustrate the cognitive strand is called If I Ruled the World. I think this game is a lot of fun, actually. This is how it works. The first player makes a statement, if I ruled the world, I would, and then they tell us what they would do. And the next player says, I couldn't disagree more because, and no matter what they really think, they give a reason to oppose the first player's idea. And it continues on like that until everyone's had a turn. So it really has you thinking on your feet because you've got to take, you might have to take a point of view that's not necessarily what you actually believe. So it can be a lot of fun. All right. And now the social and emotional strands. So who is going to be speaking for our last group?
I'll speak for that one there.
Right.
So we found that this is really the interacting, how students will interact with each other, not just thinking about what they're personally going to say. So we saw skills such as collaborating, listening actively, and how to interact with others. So what I liked is the respect part, so it talks about showing empathy and really having that positive attitude towards what others are saying. And the last component was the self-confidence, and so making sure students are aware of how they're coming across and having their own behavior show that, I guess.
All right. Well, and this is what we were thinking too. Basically, social and emotional, just like you said, our interactions with others. So that's a great way to summarize it. I should point out that all the strands work together, and you might have noticed there's a certain amount of overlap.
John, can I just stop you there because I think
Yes.
Daryl has a question. He has his
Oh.
hand up.
All right.
With me, the social and emotional was one that I used to have the most trouble with. And the way I worked around that was by picking materials that were relevant. So we read a story called Because of Winn-Dixie. And when we do that, it's you ask the children, okay, who's had alcohol negatively affect anyone in their family? And nobody's hand goes up. So then I tell them about my Uncle Arthur and how I loved my Uncle Arthur, but he was an alcoholic. And we talk about that. Then all the hands go up. And it goes from there to safe places and that people aren't bad people. And we talk about all different kinds of things. But for me, it comes from picking the right materials at the outset.
Yeah, absolutely. And you obviously had a really positive classroom environment where you were able to share something with your students, and then they were able to feel comfortable sharing their experiences as well. And
yeah, I find if I don't give them a chunk, I can't really expect anything. It's not fair.
yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, thank you very much for adding that. It makes a big difference. It's social and emotional part is like, you might say, well, the cognitive, it has all of those thinking skills, and that's what we need to teach. But, the social and emotional is just as important. So thank you very much.
The other thing that's happening now with COVID is because we did the Winn-Dixie and because we're open about that, they're open about their parents being worried about money. They're open about their parents fighting. They're open about a lot more things because that opened the door for them. So when we do our weekend reviews, a lot more stuff comes out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things too in a lot of the research that we did about talk was that when students are able to express themselves more and have a voice, they can talk about things that are difficult and work their way through it because they're able to talk about it rather than keeping it inside. So it's really giving students a voice is so important. That's good. Thank you very much for sharing that very important piece. So the strands do work together, and you've probably noticed there's quite a bit of overlap. So for example, if we're actively listening, this is probably reflected in our body language. So it's connected to the physical strand as well as being part of social and emotional. And when we're interacting respectfully, the linguistic strand comes into play as we choose to use respectful language and register. And the cognitive strand is activated when we use sentence stems, for example. I see what you're saying, but here's what I think, as a way to politely disagree with someone. So all of the strands work together in that way. And here's a listening game that requires the players to pay close attention and follow instructions. And I want to thank all of the groups for the great, for all of your great work, the way you shared those strands with us. And now we're going to look at that metacognitive strand that is related to all of the other strands because it represents the idea or the philosophy grounded in the QEP that students must reflect on their own skills and processes in order to grow as learners. And this strand includes things like reflection and self-evaluation to help students identify their own strengths and areas that need improvement so that they can set specific learning goals. And here we have a metacognitive activity. It's really just a simple reflection that we'll do before we move on. So I'm wondering if you could please take a minute to consider how you might use the Oracy Skills tool to help your students develop as learners and thinkers through talk. And you can share your reflections in the chat, or you can put your hand up, or even just put your mic on. We're not that many, so you can share your reflections in whatever way is most comfortable for you. Yeah, Stephanie says rely so much on norms and classroom environment.
And Daryl has his hand up too, Don.
Oh, good. Okay, go ahead.
I find this is one of the things where I drop the ball. And when we go through the whole group and we go, do you remember when you used to and now you can? And do you remember when you used to? And it's everything from being able to play with other kids to being able to read. And then my guys can't see how far they've come. And we remind them how far they've come. You can watch them get bigger. But it's something that I often drop the ball on.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe these tools will help you to keep that in mind. We have some other things coming up later related to the continua that we're going to be looking at in the second half, and maybe those are the kind of things that can guide your students to guide your students with this as well. So I hope that will work. Okay, and Marina, Oracy Tools helped you to shape the talk lessons, pick a strand, build a lesson around teaching those specific skills. Yep, Marina, because you were part of the talk triads, you had a lot of time to work on this, and you had definitely had an interest in doing this. I know you took it really quite far, so we really appreciate the work that you did, and I'm glad that it seems to be paying off too. Andrea, yeah, you can see what's missing and what you need to tackle exactly, and I think the continua will help you to build on that idea too. Yeah, yep, it's this can really help with their planning, as Stephanie says. Okay, that's good. Anything else before we go on? Okay. All right. To finish up this section on the explicit teaching of talk skills, we'd like to share with you a video that really illustrates what can happen when talk is taught explicitly. And at the end of the video, I'd invite you to use the chat to share one big thing that jumped out at you from the video, maybe something that surprised you. Maybe there's an idea that you could take away from this that you could use in your teaching practice. So we'll see if we can get our video to play. And I have a feeling it's been a little bit glitchy. I think this will work.
Put your hand up if someone in your family comes from somewhere else in the world and has come to live in London. Could you turn to the person next to you and have a discussion about this talking point?
I think Stratford is a better place to live because they're not against anyone, and can I just clarify you? What do you mean by against? Like,
Oracy is the keystone to everything that happens in the curriculum. There are such high expectations for talk, and it does really make a difference in the children how articulate and how confident they are.
The vision of School 21 is to prepare young people for the world that they're going to go into in the 21st century. I think one of the biggest barriers to the students we serve really getting on in life is lack of good communication skills. We need to elevate speaking to the same level as reading and writing.
So we have a vote. What makes me enjoy talking the most is that everybody's listening to you and you're like part of the world and you feel respected and important. When I'm talking, they're listening what I'm saying, and sometimes they give me questions, or maybe I give them questions.
Every child within this school is expected to speak in every lesson, in every opportunity throughout their school day, and we try and create lots of different contexts for young people to hone their skills as speakers. So what I want us to do now is to have a discussion about different kinds of culture, and I want us to discuss this. Some cultures are better than others. I think every teacher, if you say to them, do you talk in your classroom? Of course there's talking in the classroom, but what's different here is the deliberateness of it. Every teacher needs to have that toolkit of things that they can draw on to bring effective talk into their practice. We've done a lot of work introducing sentence stems that children can use for different situations. So for agreeing with somebody, for disagreeing politely with someone, for challenging someone. And while we're doing that, I want you to make sure that you're using some of the sentence stems. So you might say linking to someone's point or build on something that somebody has said.
Build on I agree, because maybe
the thing that's had the biggest impact on my practice is probably discussion guidelines. We are going to be discussing why beliefs were important or why they weren't important in ancient Greece. Could anybody remind me about any of our discussion guidelines?
One of them is when someone's not contributing, you have to invite them by asking them a question or saying their name.
Excellent. Why would you do that, Aaron?
Then everyone has an idea.
Everyone gets to share their idea, don't they? Well done. So discussion guidelines were created in conjunction with the children. These are the 5 or 6 key things that we think make a really good discussion. I've been able to take a step back, and I think that the children take on a larger role within the classroom?
I think it should be Aries and Leo because they're both the god of war. Yeah, but to challenge your diva, there are lots of fish.
So another key way of promoting oracy in the classroom is to think carefully about the groupings that you use. So whether you're getting them to talk in pairs or in trios or in larger groups. Sometimes it's best to have students in threes. Sometimes we look at how they can stand in the traverse opposite each other. Each of those different groupings enables a different type of conversation.
If you see inside them, we're all human beings and we're all people.
Our oracy program is comprehensive. It has to be seen in maths and science and those subjects that traditionally haven't had a talk focus.
There are 24 cookies altogether. There are 3 children.
I would say that I'd always encouraged talk in my maths lessons before, but what's changed is that I really plan very carefully for talk, and I model and structure the talk very explicitly. Okay, so we're going to go and do our talk task. The talk task, they get to practice what they've done in the new learning, and they're talking through what they're doing. So it's about developing the vocabulary and language of explanation.
We were talking about fractions. We done like 4 circles, and then we needed to share 24 in each group. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We were using sentences to help us. 24 shared equally between 4 children is equal to 6.
There are lots of different reasons why we get students who may not feel it's almost their place to speak. So for all those reasons, oracy is an issue of equality, of equity, of social mobility.
Wow, I heard some pretty amazing discussions going on just now. So let's get some feedback from some groups. Because of the focus on oracy, we've seen our students become much more confident in their ideas by creating the context and the opportunities for them to speak. They've just flown and become eloquent, engaging speakers. Hayden?
We came to a decision and said that we disagree with the text. Everyone is unique. Everyone's the same, but they do their things in different ways.
All right. So if you have any comments about the video, what you saw in the video, this would be a great time to put on your mic or pop your ideas into the chat. Was there anything that surprised you? Any big ideas that you can take away? Anything you could use in your teaching practice? Does it relate at all to what we were just talking about earlier in the presentation? Lots of different groupings, yeah, and they're very engaged, absolutely. Encouraging everyone to speak, yeah. Everyone had to speak and share, and they really were on task and engaged, yeah.
And Darryl, yes?
The only thing is I don't like the idea of exercises. For me, it's got to be something that's pervasive, that's kind of ingrained into everything that we do rather than, it's time for speaking.
Okay. Maybe it was not evident in the video, but we've really looked at a lot of the philosophy behind this this School 21 and Voice 21, the organization. It's a nonprofit organization in the UK that is encouraging oracy education in the UK. They really do look at talk as being although you are explicitly teaching talk, it is something that they're trying to encourage across the curriculum and in context, teaching talk skills in context. Maybe didn't come through as well in the video, but yeah, it's a good point that you make as well. Yeah.
And Andrea has her hand up too.
All right.
I just wanted to say that it's really interesting that all of us are not necessarily communicating through talk in this, what we're doing here, like while we're online like this. And I think that's probably reflects what kind of education we had. And I think also that like the hesitancy of people to participate, like even when we were in our little breakout room, I was like, no, I don't want to present, but I've never liked that, but I find that it is really, really necessary for people to speak in order to be heard by other people and to sometimes just work out what they're thinking in front of everybody. I really think that it's an important thing to be able to do in a classroom.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to the idea of the classroom environment, or whatever your context is being able to say what you think and work out your ideas, because what you said is so true about talking to learn. It When we talk things out, even if it's not like really articulate or organized, we're talking through our ideas to try to
get
make
that clarity.
to get the clarity. And like Melinda and I do this all the time when we're working out stuff. How are we going to do this? How are we going to approach this? How are we going to solve this problem? And we just talk, and it gets closer and closer to where we want to be, and to come up with some kind of idea or solution that we can actually use. That's great.
Daryl has his hand up too.
Okay, and I see some great things in the chat there.
I love what Andrea said, because we talk for a living, but we still test the waters, so we went in, and so we have to know that it's safe. And then when we know that it's safe, we engage, and that's what we have to create in our classrooms. And one of the things that helps me the most is making an environment where the kid who's the who the pause child, the long time, the fact that everyone else respects that child and makes the room safe for that. We do it, and we do this for a living. So I find that pretty cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I guess, like Andrea said too, some of us, I mean, I know for myself, when I was in school, we were not allowed to talk. You were supposed to be quiet, just sit and listen. And I think, when we're allowing our students to talk, and encouraging them to talk, and giving them tools they need so that they can talk, we're really doing them a great service that we missed out on. Some of us missed out on, because we didn't have that chance to talk. And that's probably why some of us are, I know I am reluctant. You throw me into a breakout room in a group, especially with strangers, like I don't really want to say much, and don't ask me to be the one to present to the whole group and be the spokesperson for the group. Like, please don't make me do that. But like you say, yes, we do this for a living. And so I think the more we do to help our students be comfortable speaking, using their voices, the more we do, the better. And we're really doing something great that will serve them well throughout their lives.
Yeah. Sarah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Just to offer a different perspective. So like I was the generation, the opposite of some of you folks, where we were evaluated on talk more. Like my year was the reform year, so I went through the system with teachers not quite sure how to evaluate it. So it's really great to have this, because I remember like in school we had like certain times where the teacher would evaluate us, and I would get so nervous because I'm like, oh my gosh, here we go, this is our group discussion, this is it, or the presentation. So it's really great to know that we are going to be doing, or that teachers are evaluating in other situations or teaching it, and it's becoming more the norm, like a classroom community, and making shy students feel like, okay, they can talk. It's not like a pressure, like a one moment situation in the classroom. So I find it's really great to see that it has come a long way from when I was in school, when it was starting to be evaluated, or evaluated differently, I guess. So it's really great to see the progression, and interesting to now be on the other end of it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really good to hear that perspective too, and that you were working towards being allowed to talk in class, but it might have been this high stakes one discussion that is the whole mark. And now we know that we need to have lots of different evidence that we collect along the way, and support our students and teach them, and maybe not evaluate every discussion that they have, because we need to teach them how to do it, let them practice how to do it. That's great. Thank you for all these. And there's some wonderful comments in the chat as well. So I hope that everybody's had a chance to follow those.
It's a lot to follow because we have synchronous chatting going on at the same time as asynchronous chatting in the chat. So it's all of these conversations that are happening simultaneously.
Yeah, and great ideas in the chat there. Really good points coming up. Any last word on the video? This is you'll have a link to the video in the PowerPoint that we send to you, so you can watch this again if you like. And if there's nothing,
I just might mention that for those of you signed up for the book club, Transform Teaching and Learning Through Talk, it's coming from, we saw actually, is it Amy Gaunt that we saw in the video? Yeah, she's one of the authors of that book. So, and it's coming from, Dawn's showing it. It's coming from this Voice 21 program. So just point of interest.
I love that book. I'm so glad you're doing it, Stephanie. I hope everybody enjoys it, and I think they'll get some interesting ideas from it. All right. So if there's nothing else at this point, I'm going to pass it back to Melinda.
Turn my mic on to start with. I'm going to try and get us through just a little bit more on the Oracy Skills tool, and then we'll have a break. And then after the break, we'll come back and we'll look at the continuum. So if I can manage to go back and share this. How's that look?
Looks like we're at the beginning of the presentation. But we see.
But does it say purposeful Oracy tasks?
Oh, it does. I'm sorry. It's the same.
Okay, so we're all good. We're just like,
it's all good. It's perfect.
Okay, so we've looked at positive classroom environment. We looked at creating clear norms and guidelines, and we looked a little bit at the explicit teaching of Oracy skills. And our fourth and final foundational belief is to include purposeful Oracy tasks. So in just a second, I'm going to play another short video from Edutopia. I think it's about 3 minutes, and we'll see some students working with talk moves in the classroom. And we'd like to just for you to keep this question in mind as you watch. What Oracy skills do you notice students activating in this clip? So here we go.
These are the keys to participating in a conversation fully. Sometimes we all need a little bit of a kickstarter to feel like we can contribute. Children are going to struggle a bit, depending on how confident they feel in speaking up in class. And yet this teacher wants everybody in the class to feel valued. So the kids are all learning phrases that can inspire other kids to contribute more easily. We're trying to build a conversation here that is a community of caring and respect. So look at your talk moves on the table today, and I have a Post-it note here for you. Talk moves are essentially sentence starters that students can use to get themselves into the conversation and to draw other people into the conversation.
By the government, and they just can't figure out what to do.
I taped the talk moves right on the table so that they would be ever present in everyone's mind. Today, I want you to keep track of your talk move. Every time they used a talk move, they put a check on their sticky note. So if somebody at your table looks like they don't have a talk move check mark yet, invite them into the conversation. How could you do that?
Say like, what do you think?
Definitely. Would you use their name?
Yeah.
Awesome. Everything about activating a child's cognitive skills begins with activating their social connectedness. Verbalizing and using language and working with peers creates that kind of social stimulus that drives the development of the brain.
I pretty much look at the thing every single time to see if there's like something I can say, like a clarifying question. Can you explain more about like why you would get in trouble?
He spray painted something on his rival soccer team's school, and he when you ask a person a clarifying question, it's either, oh, I heard you said, or can you repeat what you said, or to add on to.
They help enormously with language learners. They give everybody a platform to jump into a conversation because half the sentence is there for them already.
but they also challenge other types of learners who may be accustomed to doing independent work and they need a bridge to collaborate more with a group. It pushes kids out of their comfort zone of social conversations and it moves them more towards a professional and an academic kind of register.
All his accomplishments in his past, like all the other marches he had, like Martin Luther King's, his other previous marches, and he wants to help this next march.
I heard you say previous marches. Like, does it say anything about like?
Yeah, like he was in Martin Luther King marches.
I do talk moves because in order to have a great discussion, everyone has to feel like they're part of it and valued. And when they walk away, they really have bridged a gap with someone that maybe they wouldn't have necessarily talked to or talked to on that level. This teacher is aware of children having different levels of comfort and discomfort, of making their skills visible, and she's getting kids to support each other's participation with these talk moves. This teacher created a pathway for every single child in this class to belong.
Okay, so just in the chat, I'll just pop your mic on. What Oracy skills did you notice students using in this clip? Questioning, yeah, which was in the cognitive strand, absolutely. Asking questions, also in the cognitive strand. How to move the conversation forward. Meta self-evaluation with the check marks, yeah. Social and emotional by engaging others that hadn't spoken, interacting respectfully. Physical, they were making eye contact. So lots of skills from across the board. Interacting respectfully, absolutely. I'm just going to focus on two. Okay, here we go. So if I just hone in on the strands where we can isolate some of the skills that we may have noticed, one of the main ones I think that you mentioned was collaboration. So students were participating in a small group activity. And then you also said they were respectful. So yes, their interactions were respectful and constructive, and they were really developing positive attitudes towards their peers. And you mentioned also that they were actively listening as they were supporting each other's interactions, which brings us over to the cognitive strand. So I'll just like put in a little arrow here. You mentioned a couple of the skills like questioning. So here the kids were communicating their ideas and information. They were building on their own views and the views of others. We saw them using talk moves directly on the desk that were helping them to negotiate meaning. We noticed them referring to the sentence starters to help them clarify information and to ask questions. So we can pretty much see, just whoops, how the strands really worked together here. And you also mentioned skills from the physical strand as well. So if you'd like some more ideas for using talk moves in your classroom, there's a great selection on the Literacy Today website. It's in the secondary section under quick links, and the address is on the screen, on the screenshot on the top left-hand corner. And I'm just going to hone in on what's available there. And I think at the same time, Don will put a link in the chat. So if you want to access them easily, you can. So this is just a quick look at the talk moves that are on Literacy Today that can help support cognitive oracy skills. So there are sentence starters that can help students to contribute an idea, to build on an idea, support or challenge an idea. And if students notice the conversation going off track, or if they get distracted, there's sentence starters to help them focus the conversation, to monitor understanding and to synthesize. So these are all great ideas, but you may also want to even just brainstorm your own talk moves with your students, which is a really good way to go about it as well. Okay, so how can we integrate the skills that we want our students to practice into our planning? I don't want to overwhelm you, so this is completely optional, but we've also created just an interactive PDF. It'll be in the Google folder. If you want to use it, you can. You obviously do not have to. It's not a tool that you have to use, but we've done it and we'd like to show it to you. So the planning tool basically here gives us a brief overview of the Oracy skills on the first page. And then on the second page, it's an interactive PDF. So you have a template that you can fill in. basically there's a section at the top. So if you're planning your talk task, or if you want to really plan the talk carefully, you can write in your purpose, your context, and your audience. And that's just a close-up here of an example that we've filled out. It's basically having students focus on the physical strand and the metacognitive strand. It's students that are in the context of a literature circle, and we want them to be aware of their voices so that they talk loud enough for their small group, but not too loud that it's going to distract the rest of the classroom or to distract or upset anybody else in the groups next to them. So we would have them practice, let's say, physical skills like shush and putting their finger to their mouths to say you need to be quieter, or maybe cupping their ear to say, like, I can't hear you, can you speak up a little bit? And we would have them practice that so that we're using these physical skills in the context of a literature circle. So that's just a quick planning tool that we wanted to show you. And I'm not going to go through it in too much detail, because right now, before we go to break, I would just ask you what your first impressions are of the Oracy Skills tool, or if you have any questions or comments about the tool before we go to break. It's all good.
Looks like we're good. I think maybe we need a lot of thinking time before we to process all of this, because we know we've thrown an awful lot of we've thrown an awful lot at you in a short amount of time.
Yeah.